stupid dog! You made me look bad! You stupid dog. Ooga booga booga! Ooga booga booga! Ooga booga booga!
Booga booga booga! Booga booga booga!
Oh! Ooga booga booga!
Hi all y'all, I'm Fallen Ninja and welcome to Animation Nation, where today we're going to be talking about Courage the Cowardly Dog, which ran from 1999 to 2002. So let's get into this, shall we, and talk about the characters. Courage is voiced by Marty Grabstein, who wasn't actually a voice actor. This was the only animated thing he was ever in. Now Courage is a cute, unassuming pink dog, and his name may sound ironic, but the Merriam-Webster's definition of courage is the ability to do something that you know is difficult or dangerous. And that pretty much well sums up Courage himself, because he seems completely terrified of everything, but then he goes and faces it anyway. Muriel is voiced by Taya White. Muriel is a sweet woman, and she's also probably most likely deaf, because she says something like,
You know I can't hear you without my glasses, Courage.
and that also probably explains how she can put up with Eustace as well, because she can't hear him. Speaking of Eustace, Eustace is actually voiced by two people in the series. The first is Lionel G. Wilson, who was the narrator for Brain Games and was Dan and Levi in Superbook. But halfway through he quit, and so Arthur Anderson took over. And Arthur Anderson, like Marty Grabstein, is not a voice actor. This was the only thing that I noticed him voice acting in, or at least the only animated thing I recognized. Eustace is a mean, cold-hearted, and greedy person. He's not a nice man. But there is an episode where he tries to be. There's an episode where he goes to see his mother because it's Mother's Day, and he tries to be nice to her and get her flowers that she's allergic to, which goes over pretty well. He also gets her chocolates that she can't eat, so that goes pretty well too. And throughout the episode, we get to see how his mom treats him, but it gives us more of an insight into why he acts the way that he does, which very, very deep down, he is a nice person, and he shows it every once in a while. Ma is voiced by Billy Lou Watt, who was the voice of Astro Boy in Astro Boy, and the voice of Kimba in Kimba the White Lion. Ma is also pretty mean. She's always saying condescending and derogatory things to Eustace, like he has big shoes to fill, and he'll never be able to fill them. Way to boost somebody's confidence. She does have one insecurity, which we find out in one of the episodes, and that's that she's bald, like everybody else in the family. That head of hair is actually a wig. Shirley the Medium is voiced by Mary Testa, who did additional voices in the VeggieTales. She was a really odd character who only came up every once in a while. She was first introduced to Courage because there was something weird happening, and she noticed it going on and went up to the farmhouse to help them out. And of course Eustace slams the door in her face, but then Courage realizes that they really do need her help, and so he goes and asks for her help again. And occasionally whenever Courage is in a pickle and the computer isn't helping, he will go to Shirley and ask her for her knowledge and wisdom, or if she has anything that could help him out. D-Lung is voiced by Tim Chi Lee, who was the animator for Courage, and he was a character designer for Doug's first movie. D-Lung is the character that shouts,
"Watch where you're going, you fool!"
all the time. He's a really fun character. The computer is voiced by Simon Preble, who is the narrator for The Birds Upstairs. The computer was always one of my favorite characters because his main function was to help Courage, essentially. If Courage had a question, he would go ask the computer, and the computer would usually give him a sarcastic remark, and then help him anyway. Courage was another fairly formulaic show, but unlike a lot of other formulaic shows, it was unlike anything that I had ever seen before, and it's unlike anything I've ever seen since then. One of the things that set it apart from other shows was the music for it. John R. Dilworth didn't want to create stock sounds or any stock music because he wanted everything to be new and fresh and unconventional, and he wanted the music to fit with the situation. There were quite a few Easter eggs in this show. The first is that the last 3 letters of Dilworth's name is hidden in a lot of the environments. Sometimes it's on the back of license plates, sometimes it's on chainsaws. Apparently Dilworth's face can also be seen in the show. There is actually a picture of him next to the stairs. Speaking of faces, somebody else's face appears in this show a couple times. Peter Fernandez's face, he's the voice director for the show, appears in the episodes House of Discontent, he is the floating head, and the episode Magic Tree of Nowhere, he is the face on the tree. This show was really cool in that it was really creepy, and a lot of people picked up on that, but I was always a weird kid. So my favorite episodes were the episodes that actually gave people nightmares. The first being King Ramses' Curse, which is the one where Courage goes out and is digging in the yard, and he digs up this slab that has these inscriptions on it. Eustace thinks that it's worth a lot of money, so he decides to keep it. Even when King Ramses' ghost shows up to tell them to return the slab, Eustace still doesn't want to give it up. He threatens to send plagues on them until he gets his slab back. And so finally, after the last curse, Eustace relents, and Courage is able to take the slab back and make everything right again. My second favorite was Windmill Vandals. A long time ago, when the farm was originally built and the original farmer put up the windmill, a bunch of vandals came by in order to vandalize the place. In order to keep them from coming back ever again, he put some inscriptions on the windmill itself. And legend has it that if the windmill ever stopped turning, the vandals would come back and finish what they started a long time ago. So in this episode, the windmill stops, and the vandals come back to try and finish what they started, which means that quite a few people by the end of the episode have lost their heads. So it's kind of a race against the clock to get the windmill fixed before everybody loses their heads permanently. My third favorite episode is called Little Muriel. Not because it's scary, but because it's funny. In this episode, this tornado comes through nowhere. That part isn't funny. I live in Tornado Alley, so tornadoes give me a little bit of anxiety. It gets funny later, because Muriel is turned back into a kid, and Courage has to figure out how to take care of her. And she says she's hungry, and she wants some mac and cheese, and so Courage starts making some macaroni and cheese. And this little segment goes on for a few minutes, where Courage will put a plate in front of Muriel, and Muriel will say, well, I want more cheese, or I want more macaroni, or I want less cheese, or less macaroni. And then after all of this is over, and Courage sets the last plate on the table, Muriel says,
"Ooh, perfect! I hate macaroni and cheese."
which is hilarious, because Courage just made like 50 different plates of macaroni and cheese to try to feed this kid. The way that this show started was interesting because John R. Dilworth just came to Cartoon Network with this idea and he pitched it to them. And so they gave him a slot on Cartoon. They ran the episode The Chicken from Outer Space. There were a lot of people who loved it. Cartoon Network really wanted Dilworth to use their studio, but he insisted on using his own studio, which was Stretch Films, in order to produce Courage. The animation for this show was another thing that completely set it apart from anything I've ever seen before. It was a really good combination of 2D and CGI animation, which not a lot of other shows have been able to use well. But the thing that made it work with Courage is that it didn't have to be realistic. because Courage was a very abstract show with a lot of abstract villains. So it didn't have to try too hard to be realistic, which was probably what made it work, unlike shows like Ajin and Gankutsuo, the Count of Monte Cristo. They weren't able to integrate the CGI with the 2D quite as well as Courage did, because they were trying to go for the realistic look, and Courage didn't have to. But they had their moments. John R. Dilworth tried to spark interest in Courage again to possibly bring it back as a series by creating an entirely CGI episode called The Fog of Courage. Instead, it just gave a different, happier ending to the series. So, tell me what you think of Courage down in the comments below, and if you have any suggestions for future videos, go ahead and put them down there too, and I will see y'all around.